If you tell me you've got a desire, I'm all in. Do you want to grow?
Absolutely.
Take notes and make sure it improves your business. Everybody wants to grow. You deserve to grow.
You don't pitch to investors to try your luck. You pitch to investors to win.
If it's not challenging, I don't think it's worth it.
The right advice to give in business is validate the idea first.
Most of you out there who want to grow, your issue is just starting, isn't it?
It's important that people just follow what they want to do.
It's an opportunity of a lifetime for all of us.
The podcast is not about them growing, it's about them helping others grow. Hello and welcome to I Want to Grow. And I Want to Grow, as you hear me every single week, it's all about our growth. But with our guests, it's a little bit different because for them, it's not just about their growth. It's about how they help others grow. And that's why they're on this podcast. So today, I am absolutely thrilled that we've got you on today, Andy. And thank you so much for coming and taking your time out on a Thursday afternoon.
Really look forward to the chat, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Please. I've known you for quite some time and I've always, in one way or another, looked up to you and admired you for what you've achieved. Could you introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Certainly. So I am the Chief Bounty Hunter at Bounty Hunter World. I'm the founder, and we've been working on this project now for a couple of years. I've been in Qatar for 17 years. I came here on a 2-week business trip 17 years ago and never quite made it home. So in that time, I was in the recruitment space, building a global company and working with the large energy industry clients here in Qatar. And then we kind of got a bit too big and too corporate, and I stopped enjoying life, and so decided I wanted to be a little more entrepreneurial, and then started my entrepreneurial journey.
You talk about your entrepreneurial journey, but let's go back a little. Let's go back to when you first came here, because as I said at the beginning of the podcast, it's not always about your growth. And I know you might say it. Now I'm doing my startup, and it's the Bounty Hunter. But you've in all of your time here, all you've been doing is trying to help others grow, and you've been giving them that platform to start their businesses. How many businesses have you helped here in Qatar?
That's a good question. We obviously built the Air Swift business when I first came here, and not just in Qatar, but we used Qatar as a base and expanded into Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi, Iraq, Kazakhstan, Kurdistan, Oman, basically anywhere else the board of directors didn't want to go on a business trip, they gave to me. And so we created entities across the whole region. Post Air Swift, we then decided to start helping businesses establish themselves in Qatar and help with market entry. And we're probably sitting at just over 35 businesses that we've helped set up and deploy and grow into the market.
But you've helped them grow to a considerable size, some of those.
Some have, yes. It's been a really healthy mix, which has really been, I think, the most enjoyable part of the journey. So we've done everything from bring very established PLCs out of Europe and into the Middle East, right the way through to complete startups, couple of scale-ups, a couple of franchises.
Yeah.
And understanding the different journeys that each of those go on, because what takes you from 0 to 1 doesn't take you from 1 to 10, has been incredibly rewarding. And I think really to round out the enjoyment is it's not been one specific sector that we focused on. We have everything from e-mobility to health and fitness to oil and gas companies, manpower businesses, manufacturing. So being able to tap into that knowledge and see how those different businesses create their own platform and their own network has been incredibly rewarding for us.
And I'm going to bring it up because I know you won't, but the people that you've helped on that journey, sometimes, okay, you say 35 businesses, but those people that were helped in that business has gone off and done those businesses. So your footprint is far more than what you've just said, because of all the people that we know now that started in a business that you set up or you were running, but now they're running their own businesses and they've gone on in and flourished.
I think that's the most enjoyable thing, whether you're in a startup or in a large corporate. It's that what I most enjoyed is the coaching and mentoring side of things, where you're helping to mold people, helping them learn from their mistakes, giving them the bandwidth to make mistakes and learn from it, and then watching their career trajectory is incredibly satisfying. I think if I look at the core team I first had way back in 2006, 7, 8, and what they've done with their careers since then, it's almost living vicariously, but it's incredibly satisfying to see that you may have played even a small part in their growth and development and what they've achieved.
I think you're 100% right, and I see people that have flourished under your mentorship, your guidance, your kind of, and it's not easy. It's a thankless job sometimes. You're doing it out there, and not everybody's going to be successful, but you've got to put blind faith into those people, and that's where it hurts sometimes, because they do sometimes. It goes down. They just didn't have what it takes.
Yeah. I think hiring's so key in any business, but you're never going to get it perfectly right. Sometimes it's not necessarily the person as well. I'll give you an example. We had a number of years ago a member of staff whose performance was shockingly bad, and when I looked at it as a leader from a helicopter view, it was, we just need to remove them from the business. They're just simply not performing. And then I was more by look than design, unfortunately for me, but fortunately for the outcome. We happened to bring the account manager over for the specific area of the business that person was working in. And I just said, look, we need to sort this out, spend 3 or 4 days, make sure the errors stop for next month whilst we find a replacement. 3 or 4 days of one-to-one, unadulterated coaching, and overnight the performance flipped. And we had I think we went from a 80% rejection rate to less than 2% in the space of 1 month. And that was simply because we hadn't given the platform or the support to that individual, and we sat watching them flounder instead of addressing the issues and realizing that maybe it wasn't a capability issue, it was a training issue. And that was a real lesson for me, that you can't just look at data and statistics and take that helicopter view. You really need to drill down into what the issues are to make sure that you're giving people the opportunity to thrive.
Yeah. And that's the key to it. Again, I'll go back to it. It's like we haven't got all the answers.
Correct.
There's the answers we don't always have. It's just that sometimes it's like having kids. You trial and error. But the biggest thing that we take on board, and I know we've had plenty of conversations, is that responsibility that that weighs down on your shoulders quite yes. a lot, because you want to do the best for them, and you want to kind of you want to give them the best advice, but sometimes you don't have all the answers. But what we do and what you do especially is incredible, in what you've done. And now I see that you're now moving into a different zone of your life, right? Mm-hmm. Where all of a sudden you had a successful business, okay, up and downs like everybody else, but you had a successful business, but you looked at it and you said, I can't give that business anymore. And now you're going to do your own startup that's flying right now.
Yeah, I think when I left AirSwift, not enough people talk about mental health in business, and it was something that came almost retroactively to me. But the realization that I was just so burnt out. I was incredibly well paid. I loved my team. I loved the business, but I was burnt out emotionally, physically, psychologically. And I just needed to get out of that environment. And it took me a long time to recover from that. In the meantime, I needed to do something. And so I knew that I had an entrepreneurial spirit and I wanted to help other companies grow, and that was great. But I wasn't passionate about my business. I got more passionate about helping other people's businesses. And it became a lifestyle business, which is what I needed. It gave me the bandwidth to, relax and not have that daily pressure. But then as I started the healing process, then I started getting my energy back, and I was like, I need to go and do something different. And so when I started looking at what really made me passionate, it was the bounty hunter journey. But even more so, I've always really enjoyed work and business and life when I'm challenged, when I feel slightly out of my depth. And so with Bounty Hunter, one of my investors asked the question, what would you say your weaknesses are as the founder? And I said, basically my understanding of marketing and tech, because I've never worked in tech and I've never really encountered much in the way of marketing. And they said, that's not a bad answer. I've literally decided to build a tech company that relies on marketing for growth. So, but that's the bit that really gets me excited, because I'm learning every day and I'm learning from experts and I'm having to engage with people that are far, far better than I am. And it's improving my knowledge and rounding me out. And that is, I don't mind working till 1, 2, 3 in the morning when I'm passionate about something. And you see the difference in the results.
Let me take you into that space of mental health. And you said that it was draining you. How important is it to understand that process so that you can help others?
I think it's a very difficult space, because for some reason it's still not a hugely, particularly in this side of the world, it's not a hugely accepted. It's almost still taboo, and it shouldn't be. And I had members of my staff that I identified were suffering, and we did wherever we could, give them time off, reduce their workload. But sometimes it's far easier to identify that in somebody else than what's going on in your own life. And it took me far too long to realize what space I was in. And then it's also very difficult, because you have responsibilities, you have a family, and to be able to sit there and say, I need to walk away from this because it's not doing my health any good. It's not doing my mental health any good. It's not doing my familial relationships any good, because I'm taking home that stress and pressure. I wasn't a fun person to be around. I'd lost my spark. But you've got to weigh that up with, I need an income to support my family. And so it's such a difficult piece. I think once you've been through it, you're so much more cognizant of recognizing that in others. And the key is to coax out the issues and get people to talk about it. We're getting much better as a society to talk about this, but there's still a huge amount to go.
And who helped? And I'm asking you personal stuff now, but who were those inspirations or those people that helped you in that tough time?
I didn't really reach out to anybody, which was my biggest mistake. I had a couple of core staff that worked with me that basically propped me up, which I'll be forever grateful for. I had the most amazing executive assistant that basically, I don't know what dark place I would have ended up in without her. And then just once you can acknowledge it yourself, it becomes easier to talk to. And then you talk to your friends and talk to your family, and then you realize that you have this incredible support system that's already there. But you can't tap into that if you don't make people aware.
And it's like as you've got to make people aware, because you'll be surprised how many people will be there. They're not going to kind of run away at the first opportunity. They're gonna help you out, because there's many of us that how to take away my problems is by helping somebody else.
Yes.
And the kind of, and this is what I say to other people, is that the rewards you get from that helping out absolutely kind of gets you through. It's easier to manage your problems or your issues that you're facing.
I think there's, was it Robin Williams, the comedian, said the sad thing about a lot of comedians is they want to make people laugh because they're so miserable inside, and they don't want people to feel the way that they feel.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that sort of sentiment in this, which is you want to help people because you almost feel a bit helpless yourself, and you don't want them to feel the way that you're feeling at that time.
We are gonna really get into Bounty Hunter, but what have you learned from your successes and your failures? What have you learned about those that you're now taking into Bounty Hunter, and why already it's starting to be kind of unbelievably successful and more people want to get involved?
I think you learn far more from your failures than your successes. Going back to very, very early in my career, I was super fortunate to have a CEO that, we moved to Qatar in 2006 at the height of the oil and gas industry boom.
Yeah.
And we were an oil and gas manpower business. So you would have had to be a moron not to have made success of it. But as a 27-year-old, your ego grows like, I'm doing really well, and this is my first gig overseas. And then we hit a bit of a downturn. And I always remember my CEO coming out and said, it's easy to manage a business that's growing. The real test of your leadership skill is managing a declining business. And that has stuck with me ever since. To have that support of someone that would allow us to make mistakes and learn from it, and recognize that it's a lot harder managing a shrinking business. I think the other thing is, the biggest takeaway I've got, you have to be passionate. You really do. I've made so many hugely avoidable errors over the last few years because I wasn't passionate about the business. I took my eye off the ball. I trusted people I shouldn't have trusted. I just let them run with things because I didn't care enough to be driven to drive the business. And that caused me a huge amount of problems. But again, you use that was also then partly the catalyst of, well, go and do something you're passionate about, go and do something you care about, go and do something that you will do well, instead of bumbling along and not paying attention.
And the birth of Bounty Hunter.
And the birth of Bounty Hunter.
How did it all begin? Why? It's like the way that you're doing it, and you're going to explain, but how did that first light bulb come on?
It was a bit of an iterative process, I think. So if I go back to in my previous role with AirSwift, we were a huge global business, and we split the world into 5 areas. I was responsible for Middle East and Central Asia. And of the 5 regional hubs, I had the second smallest recruitment team, but we made the second most number of placements. And that wasn't because I had the world's best recruiters. They were great, but it was because 70 to 80% of our business came from referrals. And we excelled in looking after people and giving them white glove service and making them really feel looked after. And as a result, they referred everything to us. And then I looked at it and...
Is it that simple? And I want to... You've picked up on a really valuable point, and especially for startups out there listening. You had the white gloves was a service, right?
Yes.
So you're telling us that you focused on your service and sales just happened? Was it because you were great salespeople, or was it because
I don't rate myself as a good salesperson at all. But I think, even I'm building a tech product right now, and I hate it. Not because it's terrible, but because I have the vision of where it will be.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's like, Lewis Hamilton knows he's going to become a Formula One driver. He doesn't want to be driving around in a cart because he wants the F1 car. And we're right now in the cart stage because it takes time to build and iterate and get customer feedback and everything else. And it can be very, very frustrating where we're up to. But the more that you deal with customers will tolerate a lot of issues. They'll tolerate imperfections as long as the service is there, as long as the responsiveness is there, as long as the accountability is there, as long as you're not promising them something it isn't.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we found. We focus so much on making sure, instead of looking at margins and how can we do everything as cheap as possible, we focused on how can we give the best experience possible.
Yeah.
And that then brought us both clients and engineers, consultants to come and work for us.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the principle behind what we're trying to build with Bounty Hunter is we're trying to offer a better service that's out there. And we're far from perfect yet, but we will get there. And we're relying on the power of referral because there's nothing more powerful than a referral. If you have someone you trust, whether it's a SaaS software you want to buy, or it's a person you want to hire, or it's a holiday you want to go on, if you have someone you trust that says, this person or this product or this location is fantastic and you're going to love it, that's so much more powerful than you bumping into someone off the street and saying like, hey, my buddy's looking for a job, do you want to go and hire him?
And that's a great point. Okay, so what was the problem that you saw out there with Bounty Hunter? What was and we all, the problem, solution, working out the figures and everything. What did you see, and what was it that you looked at with that problem and the issues that there are, and how did you come about that solution?
I think the recruitment industry hasn't had major innovation since the birth of LinkedIn. There's lots of little pieces, AI plugins and various platforms and job boards that have done a good job, but nothing's really changed the status like LinkedIn has. We looked at it, and recruitment can be very expensive if you're using recruitment agencies to hire all of your staff. You're paying fees of 12, 15, 20, 25% sometimes. Your other option is an internal recruitment team, but if your recruitment's sporadic, it becomes expensive to keep them on if there's no hiring needed, which then leaves you job boards or LinkedIn or Indeed and stuff like that. And the problem with them is there's little filter. You get hundreds of candidates that simply aren't suitable. And so you get the kind of project management triangle where you have cost, you have time, and you have quality. And, the kind of commonly people say you can only ever have two. What we're trying to do, we're trying to solve that triangle by being more cost effective than a recruitment company, but bringing better quality candidates through the power of referral and through tapping into different talent pools in a timely manner. And what I mean by that is if we sit here today and you say, do you know what, Rai, my boss is a bit of an ass. I'm fed up. I want a new job. You're not on Indeed or Monster or LinkedIn or any of the job boards. I can go home tonight and sit on my app and go, here's the perfect job for Steve. I'm going to refer him. And so you're not visible to recruitment companies. You're not visible to job boards, but I know you're available. And if I have a good reputation in-app, then my validated peer-led referral is fundamentally more powerful than a recruiter who comes across your profile on LinkedIn 6 weeks later and says, oh, hey, Steve, I see you're open to work. So we're quicker, we're cheaper, and we're bringing top quality resource.
Yeah. And where do you stand at the moment with all of this? What are the kind of things that you're working on right now?
So we're early days. It's been a journey to get to where we are. I would say we face the difficulty of being a B2B2C marketplace. A two-sided marketplace is always incredibly difficult. It's pointless as having $1 million worth of bounties on the platform and only 100 users. It's equally pointless having 1 million users and only 10 positions for people to refer to. So we're in I'd say growth phase right now where we've got a nice balance. We're growing organically at 600 to 700 users per week. We have zero marketing spend. We have we will have by next week, we'll have just breached the $1 million mark in terms of bounty value that people can refer to and earn that money. And we're currently just focused on 2 geographies, which is the Middle East, because that's where our network is, and the US, but more specifically Florida and Texas. Because in principle, what we've built works just as well for a McDonald's in Poland that needs someone to work in the kitchen as it does for ExxonMobil in Houston who need a director of engineering. But it's about building community and building network effects. So we have to be relatively concentrated to build out those network effects for it to.
And what's your unique proposition? Because we're looking at it, and I'm picking up. I know your platform, and I think it's amazing. But what's your uniqueness? What is it that's different to everyone else?
So the average social media user spends 155 minutes per day on social media. So that's almost 2.5 hours per day on LinkedIn and TikTok and Facebook or Meta, Twitter, etc., without any reward for us as the community of users. They're using our network, our connections, our data, and our time spent on social media, and there's nothing in it for us.
Yep.
What we've built is we work with hiring companies that as a much more cost-effective rate than a recruitment company. So we allow a hiring company to post what we call a bounty as low as 5% of salary. So let's say you're looking to hire a HR director. The salary is $100,000. You would post a $5,000 bounty on the platform. Our community of users then refer their trusted network and connections. So if I refer you for the job, you're one of 5 people interviewed and you get the job, we then disseminate the bounty. So 10% is split between those users that recommend people who get an interview. So just for you getting an interview, I'll make myself $100. 50% goes to the person who recommended the successful hire. So not only have I been a good friend and referred you, like everyone does on LinkedIn every day, but I make myself $2,500, and the rest goes to the platform for hosting the position. So we're trying to create a way for people to monetize their network, their connections, and their time spent on social media. Our very probably inappropriate tongue-in-cheek way of describing it, you can spend an hour a day on Instagram looking at the holiday you wish you were on, or the clothes you wish you could buy, or you can sit having your morning shit and refer your friend and make the money for that holiday.
I find it incredible because I think that this is going to create some wealthy people.
That's the idea. You see worldwide economies are suffering so much right now. Cost of living crisis in UK, in the US. This is a way for people to have a little side hustle, spend an hour or two of the weekend or an evening referring their connections. It's a way for people to help people get jobs as well, which you're always, you're giving something and then you're getting something back. People who are out of work, people on maternity or paternity leave, people who have social anxiety issues that prefer to sit at home, we're giving them a platform where they already have. When I left the oil and gas sector, I had 6,500 connections on LinkedIn in oil and gas. And then I walked away from oil and gas, and my entire network was irrelevant overnight.
Yeah.
But in this instance, I still know who's good in that space. I could still monetize my network. Retirees, that's great. They can sit in the conservatory while they're retired and refer the young bucks they've coached and mentored.
Yeah. I find it incredible what the capabilities are, and everybody's a winner. I wouldn't recommend anybody unless I thought that they were better than the job.
Yes. And we have a bit of a natural QA/QC mechanism. So if you download the app today as a new user, you will start with a reputation of 100. If you keep referring me for an accountant's position, I'm not an accountant, I'm not qualified, then your reputation will start to decline. But if you're referring good quality people and they're getting shortlisted or interviewed or offered, over time your reputation increases. So there's a bit of a gamification element as well to keep people coming back. and to stop people spamming the platform, because you want to make sure you're only making good quality recommendations. Right now we're focused a lot on energy and healthcare space, a little bit of ICT. But I think really where we want to get to is to be as impactful as possible.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is the energy sector, the tech sector, a lot of the healthcare roles that we have, they tend to be high-paying positions. And an engineering manager referring another engineering manager and making $3,000 or $4,000 bounty is nice, because everyone likes to make money. But where we want to get to as we scale and as we develop is the kind of lower end of the market, where you've got that person who's on a bus or a tram or a train on the way to the job they don't particularly like, and it's probably raining outside, and they refer their friend, the accountant or the HR manager, and they make $1,000 bounty. And that $1,000, the difference between that person going on holiday or not this year, or catching up with the rent, or having a great Christmas with the kids instead of an average one, I think that is really where we want to get to, and we would start seeing real value.
And what are because you're moving quite quickly. You are working 18 hours a day,
Yeah,
if not more.
You don't get this grey without, but it's a passion play, Steve. It's so we have an office in the US. We have a base here, and so I do in the mornings and afternoon. I do the Middle East and Europe side of the world, and then of an evening and early morning, I deal with all the US side.
It must have been easy for you though, with all your connections and people wanting to give you money.
Yeah, it's the first time I've ever raised capital. I've always self-funded every venture I've done. It's not fun. But again, talking about learning, I write a blog on it. Everyone always posts about how you build an overnight success of a company. No one ever writes about the mistakes you do and the errors. And I literally sat at home and Googled, how do you raise money for a tech company? So you need to speak to VCs. I was like, okay, who are the best VCs in the world? I got a list. This Sequoia guys look good. They invested in Dropbox and Facebook. And I was like, they're perfect for us. So I spent a month and a half tracking not just Sequoia, but an individual that I thought would be the perfect. And then I wrote what I thought was the perfect intro email. And then we had to pincer him on social media. Eventually, he was kind enough to write back, say, hey, really interesting business model. This is the concerns I would want to see addressed. But by the way, we're Sequoia. Like, come back to us when you want $100 million and you've got a load of traction. I was like, okay, whoops. And so instead of starting from angels up, I went from the biggest VCs in the world down. What we have done along the way is got an incredible amount of useful feedback and
great market
built
research,
a network of brilliant investors for the next stage.
Yeah.
But we're just closing our first round of investment now, which has been a journey. I would love, and we're still working on a few things locally, I would love to get some Qatari investors on board, because Qatar's very close to my heart. I've been here 17 years.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to become the next Kareem.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to be the next and sell for $6 billion. But what I mean by that is Kareem was originally a Qatari startup that couldn't find the ecosystem here, went to Dubai, got funded, and eventually got bought for $6 billion by Uber. I think the work that you do and the kind of the podcasts you're putting on, the events that you're doing, the Startup Qatar piece is incredible, and it's worlds away from where we were 10 years ago. There was nothing 10 years ago. I just think there's still a long way to go here, and it needs more people like you in think tank scenarios that increasing that visibility.
After I finish this podcast, I'm going to a hackathon where we're going to have 10 groups of people that's going to try and solve a problem for Nassim. which is the medical people. So it's constantly evolving. But what I like about you is that I like the things that you say. You went to the top people, but that must have been fantastic market research, because it kind of really did put you on the track.
Whenever an investor gives us really good feedback, even if it's a rejection with some thought behind it is infinitely more powerful than just being ghosted because you don't want to be told no. As a founder, you have to be incredibly thick-skinned, and you have to, no becomes your favorite word because that's all you hear. But those investors that took the time to give us that feedback go on my FU wall in the nicest possible way, because what we've done is, Investor A said, we worry that you're not going to scale this side of the business. So that goes on, and then it helps create our strategy and formulate our development plans to say, well, how do we solve that problem? And then another investor will say, well, I don't think you can scale this side of the business. So that goes on the wall, because they give you details as to why they think it'll be a problem, and that helps structure your thinking. And so all of those rejections that are thoughtful and that it's actual feedback rather than a cookie cutter, cut and paste, thank you for applying, becomes so important strategically, because you learn how investors think, and all of them have very different viewpoints on your business. And so it helps shape where you need to be. And then the idea behind it is we can very politely go back in a few years' time or a year's time or 6 months' time and say, hey, we fixed your concerns, what next? And I'm ever so grateful for those investors that take the time to do that, because so many of them just don't respond at all. And those responses are critical to our growth.
Yeah, I can understand exactly that. And I keep on saying to these young startups, do your market research and go to the people that you can. I remember, I've said this a couple of times. I remember Domino's back in the UK. They threw me out their office 5 times. 5 times they threw me out their head office. And they said, we were doing door to door. We're never going to work with you. But what I did was, every time they threw me out, I used to go to Scotland and I used to talk to a franchisee there, and then I'd go to Wales and talk to one there, and I'd go and talk to somebody in England, and then I'd bring this valuable information back, because they were telling me the problems that they were having and why they thought that our services would do well. And each time I would come back and leave my findings on the table, or I'd email everybody in the company. And it was just that consistency, and I was always coming back and said, I've solved that problem that you said we had. It's solved. We've done these data sheets. You can have all this data. We've done these data sheets. By the end of it, we done 298 of their stores across England, Ireland and Wales and Scotland. And literally, we kind of that. It was a phenomenal response, and it transformed some of the businesses, because they could actually perform, and they can get better at it, and they can push those barriers, and it's wonderful. But this is what it seems, and that's what I say to these young startups, is do your market research.
And customer validation doesn't have to be, here's a PO, we're going to buy your product. Customer validation can just be simply a discussion or an email, or you need to go out and speak even though you're not ready. The amount of companies that we spoke to when it was at concept stage and we were building the wireframe, and I would call them up and say, hey, I'm building this, what do you think? Was fantastic, because you go to your friends and family and they all go, oh yeah, it's brilliant. But that's brilliant isn't good feedback for you. What brilliant feedback is, I like the idea, but I use this and I use this, or I could see problems with this point and this point, and it helps you validate. But getting that feedback from people that you're calling up out of the blue, saying, look, I don't have anything to sell you yet, but this is what I'm building. Would you be interested in using it? Becomes incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I agree, and it's something. Okay, it's something we should all be doing. With this startup, you've pushed you were successful. Let me tell people out there, this guy was real successful, and you're pushing it all one side now so that you can focus on this startup. was a risk. What did your family say?
I'm very fortunate that I have an incredibly supportive wife. And it is a huge risk, but again, it's down to what am I passionate about. I tried juggling the two at the same time, and it just wasn't working. I was making more errors on the other businesses because I wasn't focused on them, that then took longer to fix, which then became, a vicious circle where I'm trying not to spend time on this, but because I'm not spending time, I'm spending more time fixing it. Since I made the decision to focus full time, the increase in traction and the growth and what we've achieved has been exponential. I'm a great fan of people who have side hustles and start businesses on the side and that sort of thing, but there comes a time where you need to
prioritize.
Yeah. And it's a little bit frightening, if I'm totally honest. But again, when you're speaking to investors and they say, how committed are you to your business? And you say, I'm basically closing down 17 years of my life in Qatar, and I'm not really going to have an income in the next month or two, but I'm all in, then you can't really get much more committed. So
it's an incredible journey, and I love the way that people do come out and they stick by you because of who you are, and I know that why people stick by you as well, because you're a great leader too. It's like I love what you do when you lead from the front and everybody sees how hard you're working, and they just want to support that and try to come up to their levels to support you and what your dreams are. But it's dreams that you've created for them too.
Yeah, I think you have to be up front and center. I think I'm not in any way comparing myself to him, but if you look at someone like Elon Musk, he's the richest man in the world, and yet he's sleeping under a desk in the Tesla factory and sleeping at SpaceX and sleeping on a couch at Twitter HQ. He doesn't need to do all of that. He could go and hire the best team around him, but he leads from the front because he can't back off. He's so passionate about it. And, I feel like I've done something crazy by going all in on this. Like, he's another level crazy. He doesn't need to do it, but it's what drives him.
I thought you were crazy, to be quite honest with you. I really did. I thought you were crazy, but I've seen over a period of time now that you're not crazy, because I've seen points where I've been watching you, and literally I know how successful you've been, but I saw you going back to basics, and you didn't. And I was watching in this very building, and thank you so much for Scale 7 for supporting people like Andy and people like us to do these podcasts and to get that word out about the ecosystem and people that are making that ecosystem special. So thank you very much, Scale 7. You really, you're doing amazing things. But we were here, it's just out there, I think it was, when you were there hustling, trying to find investors.
Yeah.
And it's like you went back to basics, and some of the things that you were, and I'm looking at you and I'm thinking, I don't think he's done this before. But you didn't care, because you just, okay, if that one, they weren't listening too much, you found another one.
Just dive in and learn. I mean, it's the best way, right?
So in saying this, and I've got the utmost admiration for you in saying this. Tell us some of those milestones that you've already hit with Bounty Hunter right now.
So I did what I call an orbit diagram, which is concentric circles, and you build out what you want year 1, year 2, year 3 to look like. And we're 6 months into our year 1 cycle, and we're about to hit most of the metrics for year 1. So it's a combination of onboarding new hiring companies, or recruitment companies that work with us and basically subcontract their work to us. And then most importantly is the community building and getting users on board and used to using it and referring people. In the last quarter, we've done just over 2,000 referrals and recommendations for the positions that we have on the platform. As I mentioned, we're growing at 700 users per week at the moment, and we haven't ratcheted any marketing costs for that. We've spent a huge amount on the development of the technology. Next week, we'll be launching our AI and machine learning pieces, which is almost a contradiction because we keep saying we're putting the human back into human resources. But I think there's a place for AI and machine learning within that. Yeah. And I think what we're building doesn't replace, it's not doing the job of the sourcing, but it's helping with supplementing the recommendations. And we have like a guild ranking system. So if a hiring company has a short list of 50 candidates, it will rank them based on suitability and various other things. And I think everyone's so focused on AI and ML just as buzzwords and to put them in that they're trying to create things that maybe we're not ready for. I see a much more sensible approach, which is supplementation and improvements rather than replacements right now. Yeah. And so we're looking at building out those. They should be live next week with a little bit of luck. By the end of the year, we expect to have closed the round and really gone on into marketing programs. We have a couple of strategic builds we're going to do. We're going to actually build our own job boards to feed into the system and basically build an ecosystem around Bounty Hunter, kind of looking at it a little bit like Reliance Petroleum did, where they started with a petrol stations, followed the supply chain, ended up building the biggest oil and gas company in India. We're looking at the whole recruitment ecosystem and saying which bits can we self-build ourselves rather than plugging into others. What can we do ourselves to create a more holistic ecosystem that is fundamentally more cost effective and allows us to keep our costs down to then the hiring companies and recruitment companies.
And can I you can tell me, I'm not telling you, but how much did you raise?
We have $800,000 of a 1.2 million raise.
Whoa, that's some big step there.
Yeah, that's also terrifying because I don't mind iterating and making mistakes when it's my own money, when we're bootstrapping, but when you have the fiscal responsibility of investors' money, then it makes you a lot more structured. I wouldn't say conservative because I think you still have to take risks in order to grow, but it does make you a lot more structured in your thinking as a result.
You're very humble. Okay, you're very humble, but I'm going to get you. Why do you think, because you're convinced this is going to work?
Yes, I am. And the weird thing is you read on the internet about how to raise money and you go to VCs and you go on this website and you pay this money to do this and you spend, I call our pitch deck Schrodinger's deck because it's simultaneously too long and too short and too informative and not informative enough. And the reality, we must have 70, 80 iterations of the pitch deck. Our second biggest investor happened because I was working on another project, doing some introductions into Qatar, and he's on a Canadian project. Yeah, based out of New York, and we'd spent weeks and weeks and weeks on this other deal, and then he called me one night when he was in Japan, and he was like, "What is it you actually do other than fix all my stuff for me?" And I was like, "Oh, I've got my little tech company." He was, "Oh, what's that about?" We spent an hour just chatting about it. He's like, "Oh, I have a buddy in SoftBank, send me your deck and I'll send it to him." And then just as he hung up, he's like, "I might just throw 100K in myself." And then he hung up. I was like, was he serious? I was like, "What do? Do you just call him straight back?" So I just play it cool. I waited 5 or 6 days, sent him the deck. And then I WhatsApped him, said, "Did you send your buddy the deck?" He's like, "Oh, no, I'll do it now." And I was like, "Oh, it's really cool." And that was it. So I followed up a few days later. I was like, "Were you serious about putting some money in?" He's like, "Oh, yeah, I really like the idea. Will 200,000 help?" I was like, "Holy crap." I was like, "Yes." And literally, it was wired an hour later. And then I called him up. He's like, hey, you're in New York in a few weeks, right? I was like, yeah. He's like, let's go for dinner and you can tell me about Bounty Hunter because I don't really understand it. I was like, but have you read the deck? He's like, well, I glanced over it. I said, you've just wired me money. He's like, yeah, but I'm investing in you. The way you talk about it is like, I'm lost with half of it, but I'm investing in you. I was just mind blown.
I'm so pleased that you brought that up. How important is that you found that right now? Is when something like that happens, that there actually are just buying you. And it's so important for these startups to realize that you can have the best pitch. He never read it. He never looked at it very much.
Yep.
It's like, and it's so important to get yourself across, to get that ambition, get that kind of.
It is, and you can't do that in a 20-minute Zoom call with somebody. You have to build the relationship over time. You have to build that credibility over time, and just be a little bit raw. Let them see you, because a huge number of super successful startups today pivoted so much from what they originally started as, but the investment was in the founding team, because that's what they're looking for. If this doesn't go well, do you have the mental fortitude to ride out the storm and maybe pivot into something different? That's what they're looking for. Because unless you've just off the back of you've just exited your first unicorn, you're moving into something else. If you're a first-time founder in particular, that it's about the investor, unless they're hyper-specific in their thesis, they're never going to know the business as good as you do. So they're never going to be able to make that decision based on expertise. They're looking at, does it seem right? Is it scalable? And more importantly, is this the right person to go and lead that? And are they going to give me the best chance of a return on my capital?
Well, I really do wish you every success. With with everything that you've learned right now, from being an entrepreneur and running a really successful businesses, to now actually running your own startup that you've raised a considerable amount of money in the very early days, because it's very early days. What's the advice that you can give to anybody out there right now?
Being a founder looks like the best job in the world. And I have this running kind of joke argument with my wife where, she's like, you're your own boss. You don't have to get up at the same time as me in the morning. And I was like, yeah, okay, so I get out of bed an hour later than you, and you resent me for it. But I'm also going to bed finishing my calls at 2, 3 in the morning. It requires an incredible amount of resilience. If you get it right, it's incredibly rewarding. But it's a slug. It's rejection, it's heartbreak, it's stress, it's pressure, all whilst you've got pretty much no income coming or very minimal. Most of the people you end up hiring, you're paying more than you, because you have a responsibility to grow the business, not to live off the business. Otherwise, I would just stick with my lifestyle business, right? You have to be incredibly thick-skinned. And I think, going back to the very beginning of our discussion, if I'd have started this 5 years ago, we would be nowhere near where we are today, because I wasn't ready mentally to take on the challenge. You just get told no all the time. The people around you tell you it's a brilliant idea and try and prop you up, but when you actually go out to market, when you're speaking to investors, you're speaking to customers, it's rejection after rejection after rejection after. And people say this all the time, but until you've experienced it, it's very hard to comprehend, because you can't see why they can't see your vision. But if you can break the back of all of that and still have the energy and the passion and the drive for it, it's incredibly rewarding in pretty much every other way other than financially right now. But hopefully that will come when we...
What kept you going?
I don't know whether I'm just so stubborn, but just belief. I genuinely believe this can disrupt a $472 billion business industry. And I just think a lot of it is timing. People are becoming more aware of the value of their own data, and they want a little bit on. There's this push from Web 2 to Web 3. We call ourselves a bridge between Web 2 and Web 3. And what I mean by that is we don't know what Web 3 is going to become. In the same way that at the beginning of what we now call Web 2, we couldn't have envisaged Netflix because we didn't have download speed and we didn't have streaming capabilities. But that's where it became. And we don't know what Web 3 will become. It's been tarnished by dodgy cryptocurrencies and ICOs and all that sort of stuff. But Web3 is about community and being rewarded for your contribution, your community, your data. And that's what we're trying to build. We're trying to build a community where you're rewarded for what you're putting into the system as we look to transition into whatever Web3 is going to become. And so I just think our timing is great. I think timing personally for me in being kind of war ready mentally, physically, and yeah, just an undying belief that I've been in the industry long enough. It's ripe for disruption, and I think we're on the right path.
Andy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We wish you every success. We hope we can follow you, we can join you, we can help and assist you. I think you've done an amazing job, and I love your team. I think that they're fantastic, and what you've created is visionary. It's excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Steve. It's been an absolute pleasure. I said at the beginning, a little bit of imposter syndrome. The other people we've had in this pod are fantastic, so I'm just grateful to follow in their footsteps.
Literally, you deserve to be here. You're a fantastic guy, and you've done so much. You've made mistakes, but you've powered through those things, and you've got to a stage where it's just I wish you all the best, and I hope this goes well for you. It's going well anyway, but I wish you every success in the future.
Thank you, Steve.
Good on you.
Pleasure.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening to this one, and there was so much valuable information that you gathered today. Some of it was going to be for your journey and your journey as a founder. What you've got to do is you've got to look at yourself on a constant basis and ask yourself, are you pushing, are you doing enough? And you've got to look at yourself, and you really got to ask those questions, because it's not an easy job. You've got to have people around you. You've got to have people that's going to assist you. You've got that team's got to be so important. You've got to be on top of your game. You've got to do the market research, and the list goes on and on and on and on. But if you listen to this story today, there's real nuggets of gold there where you can take advantage with your journey, and you can take that information. And that's what our podcast does. Our podcast is all about giving you things in ways that you can help your journey, and you can grow more as an individual, a company, and who knows, that unicorn. Anyway, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this podcast this week. Hopefully see you next week. Bye for now.